When she was christened in 1958, the Edmund Fitzgerald became the biggest ship to ever sail the Great Lakes.
The legend lives on from the Chippewa on down the big lake they call Gitchagumi.
The giant ore boat set record after record, including most iron ore carried in a single trip and most carried in a season.
The ship was the pride of the American side, coming back from some mill in Wisconsin.
They built bigger boats after her, but she continued to break records for seasonal tonnage, mainly because she ran long and she carried a lot, and she started work early and she was never laid up.
But on November 10th, 1975, she carried her crew to the bottom of Lake Superior.
Later that night when his lights went out of sight, came the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald.
Tom Walton is a retired editor of the Toledo Blade. We brought Tom back to the very dock where he got off the ore boat for the last time.
I remember this place very well. It's kind of strange to see it again after all these years. The last time I was right here, that was the last time I got off the Fitzgerald.
In the summer of 1963, Walton was a porter on the ship.
I can still picture it sitting right here and being overwhelmed by its size and knowing that it was longer and bigger, faster than any other ships out there.
His job was to help feed the crew, keep the officers' quarters clean, as well as take care of any passengers who were guests of the company. He still smiles when he thinks of the ship and that summer.
We were very much a tourist attraction, and people kind of held the ship in awe everywhere we went. And I think the crew felt that and felt a certain pride.
Walton's ties to the tragedy run deep, and his sorrow lives close to the surface.
I know where it is, and I remember where I last saw it, and that's right here. So, yeah, it's an emotional moment for sure.
His uncle Grant Walton was an oiler on board the Big Fitz that fateful night. Tom was working at a California newspaper when he first heard that a freighter had gone down in Lake Superior.
It was one of those rare moments in your life where you don't need to be told the worst news because you have a feeling that's what's going to happen, and it was indeed the Fitz.
Walton's father also spent time on the Edmund Fitzgerald and many other lake freighters during his career as a chief engineer.
Though he loved what he was doing, that love evaporated when he lost his brother, and it just really, he felt it very profoundly. And he retired very shortly after that.
Toledo was a frequent port of call for the Edmund Fitzgerald. In fact, one of her nicknames was the Toledo Express. The giant ore carrier came to this very dock to unload a number of times through her 17-year career. And even though it said Milwaukee on her stern, Toledo was truly the Fitzgerald's home port. She was here for the last time on October 31st, 1975. 10 days later, she carried her crew into the history books.
Does anyone know where the love of God goes when the waves turn the minutes to hours?
The ship was just miles from the safety of Whitefish Bay when it sank. The storm that night was one of the worst on Lake Superior in decades. Captain McSorley had radioed the captain of the Arthur Anderson to tell him the Fitz had a list. Vent covers were lost and a fence rail was down and the radar was out. But his last transmission was that they were holding their own. Soon after that, the mighty Fitz went down without a call for help.
Superior, they said, never gives up her dead when the gales of November come early.
Chris Gilchrist heads up the National Museum of the Great Lakes here in Toledo.
The Arthur Anderson was right behind her, and she made it through the storm. Other boats sailed through that storm without any problem.
So what did cause the massive ship to end up on the bottom of Lake Superior? There are plenty of theories. It was the largest maritime investigation in Great Lakes history, but an exact cause has never been determined.
The continued interest in the Fitzgerald is based on people's desire to prove the unprovable. Mysteries are good. They keep people asking questions, and asking questions is what keeps our minds sharp.
Some of the remnants of the wreckage are now within the walls of the National Museum of the Great Lakes.
This is a life raft, an inflatable life raft from the Edmund Fitzgerald. The Fitzgerald was equipped with 2 of these, one at the bow, one at the stern.
No one ever had a chance to make it into those life rafts. And the reason why doesn't matter much to Tom and many of the other families anymore. But keeping the story alive does.
And all that remains is the faces and the names of the wives and the sons and the daughters.
Those of us who once sailed upon it or who lost someone in the tragedy, I think we have a responsibility to keep the memory of those 29 men alive.
The waters of Lake Superior hold a lot of secrets. One of the biggest mysteries is what happened to the Edmund Fitzgerald. The ore carrier carried her crew to the bottom of Lake Superior on November 10th, 1975.
The lake, it is said, never gives up her dead when the skies of November turn gloomy.
This is part of the Coast Guard radio transmission from that night.
It looks from the information that we have that it's fairly certain that the Fitzgerald went down. And we're talking now about a matter of life and death and looking for survivors that might be in life rafts or in the water.
Of course, there were no survivors, and today, so many unanswered questions remain.
I think that's part of the attraction of this story and of this shipwreck, this mystery that has just not been solved yet.
The wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald sits about 17 miles offshore here at Whitefish Point, Michigan. As you can see, it is still a very busy shipping lane for Great Lakes freighters. Today is a beautiful fall day. Of course, it was a much different story on November 10th, 1975. One of the worst storms these waters had seen in decades was in full force. These waves are 2 to 3 feet. On the night the Fitz went down, waves were at more than 30 feet, with winds at 90 miles an hour. Cheryl Rosman's father, Ray Cundy, was a watchman on board the Big Fitz.
He started sailing at an early age, and he really loved it. He thought it was a real privilege to be serving on the Fitzgerald.
She vividly remembers the last time she saw her father.
As the big freighters go, it was bigger than most, with a crew and good captain well seasoned.
It was an August day in 1975. She took her children to visit with him as the boat was loading iron ore in Silver Bay, Minnesota.
We stood there and we just watched as the boat started leaving, and we just kept waving to him. He was waving goodbye. I didn't know at that time that it was going to be the last.
And the last thing anyone expected was for the Fitzgerald to become one of the casualties of the Shipwreck Coast just a few months later.
And later that night, when his lights went out of sight, came the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald.
They thought it was invincible, and it wasn't.
Cheryl learned about the loss on TV, and at first it wasn't even clear that the missing freighter was the Fitzgerald.
The news came on at 11 o'clock, and it said that there was a ship missing in Lake Superior. And I right away thought of my dad, and I prayed that he was okay.
In a matter of hours, she got the news that her father was not okay.
Sometimes it's like it just happened, and then other times it seems so long ago that I've seen him.
The theories about what happened range from the ship scraping bottom on a shoal to the wicked weather conditions that night, or a series of rogue waves. Whatever happened was so fast there wasn't even time to call for help. The Coast Guard investigation of the tragedy is the biggest in Great Lakes history.
The bottom line is that ship was doing what it had done so many times before, but there were a series of factors that we don't all completely understand, and I think that's what it was. Really, there were a combination of factors that led to that ship sinking.
Whitefish Point is known as the Shipwreck Coast. Hundreds of vessels have gone down in the same waters. But the Edmund Fitzgerald is what brings most people to the museum that sits along the shore.
People don't always realize that this ship is this close, and I think it makes it all the more real to them.
The Great Lakes Shipwreck Museum has brought comfort to Cheryl and many of the other people who lost loved ones. Inside its walls sits the Fitzgerald's bell.
We don't have our men, and we needed something that we could touch or look at.
It was retrieved from the wreckage in 1995.
The bell came up and it clanged as soon as it hit the water. And I kind of felt, and so did the other family members, that it was like telling us that everything's okay.
But the retrieval of the bell didn't bring any other answers about the wreck to the surface. They remain buried with the ship.
Often people will ask, are there new theories? Do we have a better understanding as to why this ship sank? And the answer is really no.
It doesn't matter to me, not anymore.
And all that remains is the faces and the names of the wives and the sons and the daughters